Hello everyone. Today we will be learning about ionic and covalent bonds and how to name them. So we are starting with the formula of magnesium fluorine 2. The first step is to determine whether this is an ionic or covalent bond. So we know that this is an ionic bond because magnesium is a metal and fluorine is not a metal. So a metal and a non-metal together is equal to an ionic bond. Okay, with an ionic bond, you don't put prefixes in the naming. So the name would just be magnesium fluoride. You always want the metal to be first, and you want the second element to end with "ide." That concludes this section of our video tour, and now we will open a new page. Okay, now we will be talking about the compound hydrogen fluorine HF. Again, the first step is to determine what type of bond, and because this is two nonmetals, we know that it is a covalent bond. With covalent bonds, you do use prefixes, so the name of this compound would be hydrogen monofluoride. So again, the second element always ends with "ide," but because it's covalent, you use prefixes. But if there's only one of the first element, then you don't say mono. So because there's only one hydrogen, we're not going to say monohydrogen. We just leave it as hydrogen. Again, this concludes this section. Now we will be learning about naming a compound that contains a transition metal. So the one we're doing today is FeO, which is iron and oxygen. So first we need to determine what type of bond it is. Because it's an iron and it's a metal and a non-metal, we know that it's ionic. Now, because it's ionic, there are no prefixes, but so the name would be iron oxide, but because iron is a transition metal, we have to put the charge of the ion because it could be multiple different charges. So for this, the charge of oxygen is -2, and because there is only one oxygen and one iron, they have to balance each other out. So that means the charge of iron is +2. So in writing the name, we have to write iron and then in parentheses the Roman numeral 2, and then oxide. Okay, now we're going to be learning about naming compounds that contain polyatomic ions. The compound we'll be learning about today is NaMH4. The polyatomic ion here is MH4, and that is ammonium. Na is sodium. And sodium is a metal, and NH4 is not, and therefore this is an ionic bond. Okay. So, because it's an ionic bond, there are no prefixes in the naming. So, you just write sodium, ammonite. Okay.